Hello and welcome to the Cup of Try Triathlon podcast. We're brought to you every week by our sponsors oxygenaddict.com, fueledbycake.com and raceforce.co.uk. I'm joined by the wonderful Helen Murray. Helen, how are you doing today, my friend?
Hello, Rob. I'm fine, thank you. Just making a cup of tea to settle in for the ride.
A cup of tea for the Cup of Try.
Correct.
You know, we never talked, did we? We once discussed calling this the Cup of Tea Triathlon podcast with a capital letter T, and we were not sure whether it would. Well, there we go. It had the British slant to it, didn't it?
Yes, exactly. That was it. So I have my cup of tea for the Cup of Try, and I'm ready to chat triathlon for the next.
So if you're listening on headphones and you can hear Helen slurping away in the background.
Sorry.
Sorry, but a girl's got a drink.
Wow, I'm good, so... Rob. It's we're in full marathon training mode at the moment.
Yeah, now you're building up to Malaga, aren't you?
Yeah.
Which is in, am I right in saying 4 weeks or 5 weeks time?
I think around, just under 5.
Good stuff. And we've just had a chat about this because you've just had your coaching call, but I think the listeners will be interested to find out how you're bearing up, really. So with 5 weeks to go, what's your plan in your head for Malaga? How are you thinking things are going to play out for you?
Well, okay, so I know I could probably plot it tomorrow, and I guess
I've just alienated half of the listeners.
Oh.
Everyone's going, oh, you can just do a marathon like that.
No, it would be hard, but I know I could plot it tomorrow.
Yeah, well, you've got a crazy history of like ultra running type events, haven't you? So
yeah.
You're one of the few people in the country for whom a marathon is like, I'll just knock that out before breakfast.
I'm yet to do that before breakfast, but I could probably try it one day, and then I would just spend the rest of the day eating.
That's a good thing to do during Christmas. Maybe we'll have a Cup of Try marathon before breakfast Christmas holidays challenge, where with no preparation we'll injure half of the triathlon community of the UK.
Well, that is, you talk about injury. Now that is a point, because it's very much a discussion, isn't it? Should you do a marathon in your off season? Now, a lot of people would say, don't even go there. That's ridiculous. Whereas other people say, you know what, it's okay to do. But I think it very much depends on a few things, doesn't it? And I'll let the coach explain that.
You know, as much as I do these days, Hels, it's horses for courses, isn't it, really? I think there's two ways of looking at that spring marathon. The first one is you just want to go and do it, and you get round and you treat it as like a catered long run where there's water available and gels available every few miles. And I think that makes a lot of sense for people to do a kind of run focused block in January, February, March, do an April type marathon, and then get really stuck into the sort of big build towards Ironman. But I think the challenge comes, and I've done this myself, where you decide actually you're feeling really good and your running's going really well and you're not getting injured, and great, I'm going to go and really have an attempt at smashing a fast marathon out. And speaking personally, what happened to me was, in the year I was building up to my biggest attempt at Ironman UK, I also decided to have a really good go at the London Marathon, and I was so absolutely exhausted by the effort, I just couldn't be bothered training for literally about 4 weeks afterwards.
Yeah.
I just played my guitar. So I ended up taking most of April almost entirely off training, with the odd swim and a bike here and there.
Yeah.
And it really was genuinely like the beginning to the middle of May before I could even contemplate doing some training. And I think I'd used up that mental mojo by focusing on the marathon at that stage. So I think you've got the right idea. You do it in December.
Well, yeah, I think it's something for me. It's almost like a goal to look forward to, sort of in the middle of the winter. And I like running, and I like Spain, so it all makes sense. I'm kind of personally, I'm glad that I'm doing it in December rather than much later on, because that means then, again, very personal thing, but for me, then I can not really worry about it mentally, know that, great, I've got up to the marathon distance because I have entered an Ironman for next year. So it's almost like a mental tick box, even though it's a very different kind of marathon. but also it gives me something to focus on and kind of avoids having to really get on the turbo for a few months as well. Win-win situation.
I'm not convinced, Helen, that this whole thing wasn't hatched by you as a plan to avoid my sort of traditional November, December turbo beasting.
Well, maybe. So yeah,
You
so
know it's coming, baby. You know it's coming.
yeah. Well, in terms of how I actually want to get on, I will be disappointed if I don't come away with a PB.
Yeah. And what's your PB right now?
3:46, which was done
Oh,
in Lisbon in 2012 on not much. Yeah, again, I think it was a. Oh, Rob, I think I might do a marathon in about 6 weeks.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I think you're going to take 40 minutes off your time, personally.
we'll see.
That's the call I'm making.
There we
A
go.
40-minute PB.
I'll leave it with
I'll
you.
see how you go.
Yeah, see how we
I'll
go.
see how you go. It's all good fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you're entering Ironman UK for next year. That was just kind of snuck out there then, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, it's out. Yeah, I'm going to do Ironman UK next year. Hopefully,
Good on
all being
you.
well. There's a big wedding which is going to be a big wedding. A big wedding in the
Of course.
family is going to be announced at some point. Not mine. But it's either going to be July or September. So I don't know. It could happen that I might not be doing Ironman UK, but at the moment my entry is in, and that is my aim for 2016.
So you still don't know the date of this wedding,
No.
so you still might get the rug pulled and be told that actually on the 17th of July you're going to be in Shropshire or wherever.
Yeah, correct.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we wait on that one.
Ah.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose if that happens, you always have the option. This segues nicely into our next little article here. There's always the option of a new Ironman race in the UK, isn't there?
The one that we called.
We called it, Helen.
The one that we called in Weymouth. There is.
Mystic Meg.
Yeah. Yeah. But then this is when, well, okay, obviously, yep, I could go and do that. There's that. You can transfer, because you can transfer your entry to another Ironman as long as it's not sold out, in the same geographical area, i.e.
Yeah, you can
Europe.
put it in any European
Yeah,
one, can't you?
totally. But if it's sold out, then you're kind of screwed. Or you can change it to a 70.3, but they don't clearly. This is Ironman.
You don't get the cash back.
You don't get the money back. So yeah.
Bit of a shame.
Yep. Now the interesting thing, again, this is all very, very hypothetical, Rob. But if I can't do Ironman UK, then chances are I'm not going to be around at all in August, which would mean I can't do any training. So there's the next dilemma. Would you switch it to Weymouth and just do it on not much training for the past sort of 5 weeks? Or
There'll be something else around.
Exactly,
There'll
there's
be another
loads.
race around at some point you can swap it to. You're going to do France.
Totally.
Enjoy the hills out there.
Can't wait. Yeah.
So listen to this, Helen. This is something that popped up on the Facebook group, and I've been and investigated this. Now, we talked last week about how traditionally, for a long time, we've had 50 slots an Ironman race. And obviously, the way that allocation's been worked is that the more people there are who start the race in your category, the more slots you get in your category.
Yep.
And they're divided up according to that. And obviously, they end up then pretty much with one slot in every age group, lots of slots in the male 30 to 45 categories,
Yeah.
and the occasional extra slot in other age groups as well, here, there, and everywhere. The Weymouth race has been announced as only having 30 slots, but what they're doing, it says on their this is from the Ironman.com webpage, so it is accurate.
Yeah.
It says we've only got 30 slots. For the purposes of Kona slot allocation, we will blend the oldest age groups into a 55 plus category for each gender.
Oh.
So effectively taking away the 60, 65, 70 and 75 plus age groups for both genders. So that essentially takes away or reallocates 8 slots of the 40. And I think the reason they're doing this is obviously the number of slots at Weymouth, if you're a 40-year-old man, is going to be the same number of slots as there are at a race where there's 40 slots.
Yeah.
But if you're over 55, or more to the point, if you're over 60, you are getting the shaft, and no question.
Wow. So if you're
Discuss, huh?
Well, right. So let's say you are a Okay, let's say you're a 60-year-old male, a very fast 60-year-old male, but you're going to have to beat the 55-year-old males if you want to get that slot to Kona.
You got to beat Dave Clamp, basically. You got to take Dave Clamp down if you want to go to Kona,
Wow. I
which means, and Dave Clamp is still winning the 50 plus category, isn't he? So at 57, we'll talk more about Dave later on. Um, So yeah, I wonder whether this is a decision that's been driven purely on economics, and they've looked at the pure number of athletes who are
yeah,
entering. And someone did a bit of research on this on the Facebook group, and in some of the races, it was interesting that there were, especially on the female side, there were maybe one or two entrants in the 60 plus, 65 plus,
yeah,
70 plus, and so there was that. Basically, if you completed the
yeah,
Ironman,
you
you
go to
got the
Kona.
slot. Um, which I quite like actually, because I think, do you know what? People who are 35, 40 underestimate how blooming hard
Yeah,
it's going to be
yep,
to complete an Ironman.
yeah.
We had Eddie on, didn't we? And she was talking about it. And just to finish that race, I think.
So does that, yeah, the toll that it takes on an older body as well? I mean, it's bad enough on a sort of 30-something, isn't it?
Mm. Well, that leads us into this question, doesn't it? Are we going to end up with a tiered system where some of the races are, in inverted commas, bigger than others, and some will have more slots than others? And this next raft of Ironman races that get announced are only going to have 30 slots, but they're all going to do this kind of 55 plus get one slot job.
Yeah,
And therefore, there'll still be lots of slots for the sort of the socio-economic group who enters the most. It won't detract from lots of them entering.
no,
And the ones sort of, it might only cost them 6 entries in the 60 plus category. And if you're over 60 and you want to race for a Kona slot, maybe you're going to have to end up going to one of the big races like Germany, and all the slots will be there for the oldest categories, and they'll by sort of de facto make that the almost like make it the European Championships for the older age groups, because they'll have to go there and race each other
yeah.
in order to get the slots.
It can't. What happens if, but if you can't afford to go out to Germany? You could say, well, if you can't afford to go out to Germany, then you probably can't afford to do an Ironman in the first place. But it's, I don't know. I just think that that's really, really harsh. Why
Mm.
should someone over 60 have to travel to try to compete in Kona,
Yeah, it's a tough one. We'd
essentially?
be interested to know what the listeners think about this. Maybe we'll make this our discussion of the week, Hells.
Yeah.
I'll throw something up on the Ironman group about this
Yep.
on the Ironman Journey group on Facebook, and we'll see what people say and read a few bits and bobs out next week.
Definitely. Definitely. Because
Yeah,
it's interesting. Because does that mean then essentially our Ironman saying, you know what, we don't, the older age groups don't really bring us a whole load, so don't really care so much about them even being in Kona. Is that what they're trying to say, or is it just that?
maybe what they're trying to do. I wonder whether, because there's this danger that we read evil intent into the actions of a big corporation. What they might actually be doing is saying, we've looked at the results from Kona, and a 70 plus person who's qualified and done 16 hours 50 at Ironman UK is going to Hawaii and not finishing. So we're making it a bit more selective
Yep.
in the fact that, yeah, if you're over 70, you can still go. No one's saying you can't go. It's just you have to go and race at Germany and race the other fast over 60, 70 athletes,
To
whatever,
get
to
there.
win your slot there.
Wow.
Um,
It is whatever we can say. It is difficult, really
there are some
difficult.
very, very good athletes in those age groups, though.
Yeah, really
I
difficult
remember
to get
looking
to
at the
Kona.
results from, yeah, go on,
No,
sorry.
I was just going to say, it's difficult to get there now. It's going to be even harder to get there, essentially. And as the popularity continues to grow and the number of races increase, it's going to get harder and harder. And is it going to get to the point where they will just have you win that slot, you go, no one else, no roll down?
Mm. We shall see, won't
We
we?
will see.
It's inevitably headed that way. Or will they start allocating slots on the basis of like all world rankings, where you end up having to race an Ironman and 270.3s in order to have enough points to qualify, and sort of build their economic thing that
Yeah,
way?
and a big checkbook.
You said it.
Yeah.
So when our mate Ron did Barcelona,
Yeah.
I had a look at the results in his category,
Yeah.
and guess how fast you had to go to
Now
win
hold
the
on, just tell us
60.
what category is he in?
Ron's in the 60 plus.
Okay.
Okay.
So 60 to 65.
So the 60 to 65 category.
Yep.
How fast do you think you had to go at Barcelona to get your slot?
Oh, I'm going to have a guess at 9:45.
Oh, really? It's not quite as fast as that.
Okay.
It was 10:27.
Okay, but that's still.
It's still scorching fast, yeah.
I was going very, very, very fast.
You set the bar pretty high there,
Yeah,
Hells.
I did. So, yeah,
10:27, man.
that's really quick.
Yeah. The guy who won it is from Germany, Bernd Reins. He rode 5:03.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow.
And he only won the race by 2 minutes as well. There's a guy called David Scott Miller from Britain who was only 2 minutes behind him. God, I bet that was a battle.
That would have been a real battle. See, so for them, if there's only one slot going at Weymouth, oh, that's tough. Really tough,
Yeah.
I think. Because you'd have someone like let's say Jill Fullen,
Yeah.
who is so incredible that she would easily win that age group. I know she's not quite there yet.
Kate Cumber is another example.
Yeah, exactly.
Where she's winning the age group by 30 or 40 minutes?
Yeah. So if you've only got one slot and it's going to a phenomenal athlete like Jill, then no one else would have a chance. So it's tricky, isn't it?
It is. It's a tough one.
Really tricky.
But it is a World Championships, I suppose, at the end of the day.
They want the best people there.
They want the best people there, yeah, and they're certainly getting them.
Totally.
Right, so let's do a bit of race results from this weekend, shall we?
Yeah. So there wasn't a whole load going on in terms of, well, domestically. There were a
I haven't
few.
seen anything domestically,
a few
actually.
duathlons and things, but
Funny that would have been November.
yeah, totally. But we did have the Xterra World Championships over in Maui, in Hawaii again, and I like this story, Rob. So the guy who won it is a guy called Josiah Middow, and it was 15th time lucky for him to win. That's
wow.
Yeah. So never give up. And Flora Duffy won the women's race for the second consecutive year.
That is cool, isn't it?
Yeah. Interestingly,
is that her 5th victory as well? I think she's won 5 of them now.
For the Xterra or for the.
Yeah, I think so.
That's amazing, isn't it? And this year she's had a really decent year doing the ITU as well. So.
Yeah.
That's impressive stuff. The prize purse. Well, the total prize purse for the Xterra was $100,000. So the winners each got $20,000. It just shows the big contrast, doesn't it, between Xterra and, let's say Ironman. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it's a good little prize purse, that, wasn't it? So, ladies' results: Flora Duffy took it out in 2:54. Scotland's Leslie Patterson in second in 2:59. And looking down the results, Jackie Slack, who we had on the show a few episodes back, she finished in 8th place. So well done to her. 8th. She's had a really great season as well, hasn't she, Jackie?
Yeah, really. Yeah, she has had a good season. So she will take home $800.
Breaks your heart a bit, that, doesn't it? For 8th in the world.
It really, really does.
It's a big drop off, that.
Oh, wow. And I mean, Ben Hoffman actually came 10th in the men's race. Interesting.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, he gets $500.
Still, you've had a week's paid for out in Maui, haven't you, I suppose?
I guess so.
Bit of a race at the end of it and go home with some pocket money.
I guess so.
Maybe you should get yourself a mountain bike, Hells. Go and earn some cash at Xterra.
Oh, I wouldn't say no to a little trip to anywhere nice. It'd be delightful, wouldn't it?
Or maybe next year when you get your Kona slot, we'll team it up with an Xterra race afterwards as well. You can have a month out in Hawaii.
It won't be happening, but thanks. It will not be happening. There was another big race going on this weekend, and that was the Noosa Triathlon in Australia.
Huge race, Noosa. One of the biggest Olympic distance races in the world. Am I right in saying it's still non-drafting? Is it still a non-drafting race, Noosa?
Don't know.
Someone who knows, let us know. But a bit of British interest on the ladies' side, wasn't there?
Yeah. Emma Pallant, who we had on last week, didn't we? She came third, so that was a really, really great result for her. Ashley Gentle won the women's race in 1:59.18. Charlotte McShane, who's the former under-23 world champion, again an Aussie, in 2:01, and then just behind her, Emma Pallant in 2:02, ahead of Emma Moffat and Caroline Steffen. So that's a really fantastic result for Emma.
She ran 34:58 as well, the fastest run of the day. So she's a fantastic runner. That's a really good run to solo your way from back on the bike and go and do that.
That's fantastic. And
it is, isn't
you
it?
can, I was just going to say, you can listen back to the interview that we did with Emma if you missed it. It's last week's episode. So that's up on oxygenaddict.com/podcast, or you can listen via the iTunes as well. It was really interesting hearing how she had gone. So she was a former runner, and how she's switched to triathlon under the watchful eye of Team Dillon, so Stuart Hayes and Michelle Dillon helping her out there.
Yeah, doing a great job there, obviously, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good stuff. And do you know what? While we're on the subject of our podcast, you might notice when you go up on the page, we've got a new little section on there. And we've been running now for, what is it now, 45? It'll be episode 45 or 46. Yeah. Something like that now. And so we are now turning to you guys to see if you'd like to become part of our helpful and supportive community. In line with what a lot of other podcasts are doing, we're wondering if people would be willing to become patrons of our show. Now, as you know, we've been doing this show for nearly a year, and we've been doing it for free, and we love it.
Yep.
But it is time consuming, and there are costs associated with it as well. So we've been looking at ways we can try and sort of make a little bit of money from it. Now, sponsorship goes part of the way to helping us for sure. But a couple of things we've come up with is this idea of having patrons, which we blatantly nicked from other podcasts. And the idea is, if you go to the oxygenaddict.com/podcast page, you'll see Become a Patron over on the right-hand side. And you will earn our undying love, and you will earn your undying photograph on the website if you decide to become a patron. So what we're looking for is, if you'll agree to donate £2 a month, you can have your photograph up on our website, a little piece about you and your racing history, and we'll give you a little name check on the show as well. So that's something we're trying to do to raise a little bit of cash, isn't it, Hells?
Absolutely. So if you would like to do that, check out the oxygenaddict.com/podcast.
Now, if you can't or you don't want to donate any money, you could still really help us out by going over onto iTunes and leaving a little review of the show. It really helps out with stuff like rankings in iTunes. And when people are searching for podcasts about triathlon, the ones that come up first are the ones with the most ratings and the most 5-star ratings. So if you enjoy the show and you can see your way clear to doing that for us, leave us a couple of lines saying what you like about it, and that'll go a long way to getting us up in the rankings there as well. And another thing that you'll notice as well is there's a pop-up coming up on the page when you go up to say, fancy giving us your email address to come on our mailing list. If you sign up to that, what we'll do is we'll send out an email every month or so updating you on what the shows have been over the last month and just giving you a bit of a heads up on what the shows were. And on that email will be a couple of sponsors links, basically, where if you click on those and go through to the page, if you end up buying something, the affiliate link kicks back a few quid to the show. So it doesn't cost anything extra to you, but the show's affiliate partners will pay the show a couple of percent of whatever you've spent. So we're a long way from retirement, Hells, but every little bit helps, doesn't it?
Few years to go yet.
You never know, though, do you? You never know what might happen if a community of a few hundred people can donate £1 or £2 each every month. It'll go a long way to supporting the show.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. Right, so what else have we got to talk about this week, really? We've gone through
the biggest
races, haven't we?
No, there's one race, Rob, that
Is there something we've forgotten? Let's think.
Dave Clamp, Deca Dave, Mexico, the Deca Ironman.
Helen, I've never heard of the Deca Ironman before. Tell me what that's about. Surely that's not Deca meaning 10 and Ironman meaning Ironmans, is it?
Oh, absolutely. You've got it spot on there, Rob. So the Deca.
So they do 10 Ironmans across a year, right?
No, 10 Ironmans.
That's insane.
10 Ironmans in 10 days. So you know, all the pros have to go and chase Kona points, and they're all really, really tired by the end of the year. By the time they get to Kona, because they've had to do a zillion races.
Yeah.
Well, this guy from Great Britain called David Clamp, who we've had on before, did 10 races in 10 days.
He is an absolute legend.
Yeah, and he won. He won the Deca Ironman in 131 hours, 35 minutes, and 40 seconds.
So averaging under 14 hours per Ironman.
Yeah, the slowest one was a 14:15, and the fastest, that was on day 6, and the fastest was 11 hours and 40 minutes on day 1.
The challenge doesn't stop there though, does it? Because it's not just like interesting Ironman courses where you go out to see the beautiful hillside. The lapped nature of it is just insanity, isn't it? The fact they go back and forth up and down a little strip of lake and then back and forth. How long was the bike course? Do you remember? Was it 2 miles long?
No, right. So this time the bike circuit was between 4 and 5 miles. That was the circuit. But one day on the Sunday, because in Mexico, on the weekend, especially on Sundays, like the whole family gets together and they head to parks, okay? So they couldn't therefore do the normal route around this park. So the Ironman takes place in the same park every day, and on the Sunday they had to do the bike loop 70 laps of 1.4 miles. It was like 0.7 mile out and back.
That's incredible, isn't it?
Isn't it amazing?
So the next time anyone out there's feeling sorry for themselves, you've got to imagine Deca Dave riding backwards and forwards. But like just over half a mile is only about enough time to get up to speed before you've got to brake again.
He still did.
And turn around 180 degrees.
That day, he still did a 12:57.
That's mad, isn't it?
Isn't it incredible? And they, of course, had to deal with the sort of aftermath of the effects of the Hurricane Patricia, which hit Mexico, didn't it? And so the weather one day, he said that it was like the whole lake had been filled with ice cubes. He said it was really, really cold, and just he really suffered with probably hypothermia that day. Other days he was saying that he just was, being sick or spending half the time on the toilet. So to be able to do your slowest Ironman in 14 hours across 10 days, be struggling with, nausea and...
It's mad, isn't it?
Oh, it's absolutely incredible. And he said that there were pizza stops and ice cream. And, I think there's a group of people, essentially, who look after them for 10 days. And it's amazing. So there were 12 of them who started, and only 6 of them finished. Dave won in 131 hours, as I said. The next place was Tristan Vincent of Germany, who did, basically Dave finished 14 hours ahead of him. So a whole Ironman ahead.
A whole Ironman ahead.
It's impressive, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Did any ladies finish?
No. 2 started, an American woman and Claire from Brutal Events.
Claire from Brutal Events was giving it a crack. Good on her.
And I think Claire managed... Did she do 3?
She got 3 in, did she?
I think 2 or 3, but I think she might have done 3. But sort of towards the end, it was like 18, 19 hours, kind of, 3 a.m., 4 a.m. finishing. And really, if you're not going to be able to sleep much before you've got to be back in the water, then you kind of...
Yeah, it's hard, that, isn't it?
That is
it really is, yeah.
So goodness knows how you recover between days to be able to get up and do it again.
Oh, madness. Well, get Dave on. That's the key. I'm going to phone him after this and see if we can get him on the show.
Brilliant.
And listen, thank you ever so much for joining us and coming on the show. We really appreciate you taking the time out. Of all the people in the country, you must be one of the most tired right now, I'd imagine. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling a bit weary. I've been home since Saturday now, and it's, what is it today? Tuesday. So I'm just starting to get that vague ache in the legs now that comes on about a week after having done one of these events, strangely enough. I felt absolutely great for 2 or 3 days after it, and then it's like a cumulative effect. It just seems to gradually happen.
It's like it all catches up with you, is it?
Yes. Yeah, I was actually doing my first bit of a run with a client this couple of hours ago, and it actually felt like quite hard work running at whatever it was, 10-minute miling. For
Well, the answer's clear, Dave. You just need to do an Ironman every single day for the rest of your life, and you'll continue to feel great. That's clearly the way forward for you, isn't it?
Well, it is one of the very strange things, funnily enough, that on September the 20th, so exactly a month before the race, I was doing a 50-mile race at Ladybower, and I pulled my calf muscle. And I was very concerned, therefore, that was going to have an impact on the Deca. And so I nursed it very carefully for the 3 or 4 weeks before the race. But I was actually still feeling it when I arrived in Mexico. And the first day or two, I kept feeling this odd twinge and kept wondering if it was going to get worse or maybe it was going to tear again. And then weirdly, by running a marathon every day for 10 days at a slow pace, it just got better and better and better. And what medical professional would ever recommend that you do that for an injury, that you go out and run a marathon every day and it'll get gradually better? But for me,
Dave,
now
we've got to be very careful here, mate, haven't we? Because for people who've got mindsets like ours who want to train all the time, hearing evidence of somebody who recovers from an injury by doing more training is exactly the wrong thing for me to hear.
No, well, I would never recommend it to myself or to anybody else, but because it's happened to me now 2 or 3 times, the injuries that I've had, and I've just not had the choice. I've been doing either a Deca or that run from London to Rome, that the injuries, just by going at a slow, constant pace, have gradually cleared up.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Absolutely fascinating. You're a medical marvel, Dave.
Yeah, well, it could just be that when you've got an injury, sometimes complete rest might not be the best thing to do for it, because then you've got the scar tissue building up daily. So just going for some sorts of injuries, just going each day at a slow-ish pace could at times be a better thing to do for injuries rather than rest. But it does seem very strange that to run 10 marathons in 10 days and an injury completely and utterly clears up by it, because you would generally think, oh, I'll try and get away with it, but it'll probably get worse and then I'll have to rest after I finish the event. But it
reminds me of the story of that guy who worked out how to cure Achilles tendonitis did it because he was in the army, and he figured if he did lots and lots of one-legged calf raises, his Achilles tendon would snap and he'd get sectionated home. And what he found happened was it actually cured his Achilles tendon, and he was like, oh, well, that was unexpected, but there you go. Years later, we've got the cure for Achilles tendonitis. Is actually doing really heavy weight training on it with one leg.
Yeah. Well,
so listen, let's start the interview by talking a little bit about the mindset that it takes to do something. As you know, I tried to put myself in your position before the interview, and I was thinking, if I was to be facing down the idea of doing an Ironman every single day for the next 10 days, what would I be thinking? And thought back to sort of the start of any Ironman race that I've done, and I've only ever done single ones. I literally couldn't come up with how I would possibly be conceiving of the idea of being able to do more than one in a row. So how does that work, Dave? How do you even begin to get the idea in your head that you can do this?
Yeah, well, I think that is actually the key factor. You have to get it into your head that it's not like doing a normal Ironman at all. The distances are the same as a normal Ironman, but you're not doing an Ironman each day in the way that you would normally do an Ironman. For example, you will take risks with both your speed and your nutrition in a normal Ironman race just to get to the finishing line, and you won't be thinking about tomorrow, will you? You'll just think, well, just getting to the finish line is the key factor. So I'll just go as fast as I can, and it doesn't matter if I get to the end of the race depleted food-wise, because the following day is not an important day, is it? Whereas when you know that you've got days 2, 3, and 4 to come, what happens is you just do everything at a slower pace. So the swim I do basically at no faster pace than I would do the warm-up swim at our normal Knutsford Tri Club sessions. So I'm then getting out onto the bike, and I'll do the bike at probably 2 miles, 3 miles an hour slower than I would do for a normal Ironman, which has the knock-on effect that I can therefore eat more solid food than I would do normally in an Ironman. So in a normal Ironman pace on the bike, I'd be pushing the pace so much that my muscles would be demanding blood so much that the stomach wouldn't be getting enough. So I have to really think seriously about just eating a gel type diet for an Ironman bike, whereas going 2 or 3 miles an hour more slowly just makes that crucial difference, that you can then eat more solid foods.
Of course, right. So it becomes more of like an energy challenge, I guess, across 10 days than it does a speed challenge. You're kind of trying to slow yourself down so that you can absorb in the region of what it must be like 5,000 to 8,000 calories a day's worth of energy you're using up, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And then once you're on the run, you're not thinking about just finishing the run. You're thinking about constantly stocking up, ready so that by the end of the Ironman, I want to be completely stuffed with food, basically. So the run in Mexico was 20 laps. Each lap was approximately 2K. And I would say I ate something on 15 of those 20 laps. So, and it was quite sizable what I was eating. So,
so it's like an all-day buffet.
Yes.
An all-day catered workout, all-you-can-eat triathlon, Dave. It sounds fantastic.
Yeah. So that is where the whole mindset is different. That during the run, you're just thinking all the time about tomorrow. So you don't end at the race at the end of each day feeling like you've given absolutely everything, because you've been, stopping for a minute or so after every 2 kilometers and really getting the calories in.
I wonder almost if that's a mistake that a lot of us make when we're training for a single Ironman, is that we'll go out and set our eyes on today's training plan and try and get that session done as hard as we can or as well as we can. And like you said, almost then consider the next day when the next day arrives, whereas it's a completely different mindset for you, isn't it? When you're trying to train that day with the next day in mind, it shows how much more is capable, I suppose.
Yes, but I think as well that we're all guilty. I see so many, or so few of our friends that we go out training with, who I think we all tend to have almost a kind of saving our drinks kind of mentality, rather than eating and drinking what we actually need for that training session. We all tend to, say we're going out for a 4-hour ride, that most of us would probably eat nothing in that 4-hour ride. And especially in winter, maybe just drink 1 bottle. I know that would be typical for me. And then we just think, oh, well, we'll stock up on food when we get back home again. And I'm pretty sure it would be a more sensible approach to actually get your body used to the type of thing that you've got to do in an Ironman, which is to be constantly eating and drinking.
That's absolutely it, isn't it?
Yeah, well, your performance is definitely going to go down by quite some percentage if you're not fueling properly, especially right from the beginning of the bike section of an Ironman.
I certainly think that there's something in the idea of especially as you're approaching that big race in the 3 months before it, the big bike sessions have got to be practice at training your gut to take calories in, because if we don't train the ability to do that, the body doesn't develop the ability to do that. And exactly what you say, a lot of us do take nothing, and all that trains the body to do is to not get anything, not process anything, which might be fine for your standard 3 or 4 hour bike ride, but it's certainly not fine for preparing you to run a marathon, is it?
No, and then we all miraculously expect to be able to produce our best on race day without having practiced it. I've been as guilty as anybody of that in the past. But I just realised with this eating during the marathon section of the Deca this time, about how I could feel so bad at the beginning of the marathon. But if somebody was there just handing food to me, this like every 12 minutes, that by forcing it down, I gradually started feeling better and better and better throughout the marathon, purely by having that food inside me.
Yeah. Wow.
So I feel like it's actually taught me quite a lot for single Ironman nutrition, because I feel like very often in the past I have done it on, let's just try and survive on as little food as I possibly can, rather than thinking I'll actually do better if I force more and more into myself.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what kind of performance you can put together in a highly fueled state rather than a just running on fumes state, won't it?
Yes, yeah, definitely.
So listen, you've done 10 Ironmans in 10 days here, and obviously there's a huge amount of race reports you could give us. How did it work in terms of the emotional roller coaster, both across each day and across the 10 days in general? You've said that you were perhaps feeling rough at the start of the marathon and you'd end up feeling better at the end of it, which I'd imagine is quite a unique feeling, because a lot of people in race situations, when they start feeling bad, they're not really going to start feeling better until they've finished, are they? So that's an interesting thing in itself. How was each day played out for you?
Well, every day was different, I would say.
Well, the first day I noticed you won the first day, didn't you? And you put quite a tasty performance together on the first day. Was that the idea of putting some time into your rivals and establishing a kind of dominant position in the race, or was just the way it played out?
It is very much just the way it played out. I had some colleagues who said, come on, this is the way to do it this year, Dave. Go out fast. None of this coming from behind, and just put your marker down. But to completely contradict that, I would say that the biggest advice that I could give to anybody doing a Deca is that you don't get involved in a race whatsoever, and that you just set out on day one and you virtually ignore everybody else and just do what feels like it's not quite racing pace, and it's not quite just tootling along, having a nice, comfortable, club bike ride pace, but it's that kind of 3/4 pace and just holding it there. And if somebody does happen to come past you, don't get sucked into starting to race with them, because if you do start racing, it'll come back to bite you at some stage later on. So I would say I just did it at that pace that felt quite comfortable, but quite hard to me on day one. And just a good side effect of that was that I ended up with whatever it was it about a 1 hour lead on day one?
Yeah, so, I think it was something like an hour's lead on day one, yeah.
Yeah, so from there onwards, and you try not to think of it, especially as a race, and it just so happened that day by day, by going out and just focusing on what I was doing, fortuitously, that lead kept building up. But interestingly enough, my time was quite a lot slower than last year.
Oh, that's interesting. Do you think that was down to, I know you had some really terrible weather conditions, didn't you, with the hurricane blowing in and across the race course on about, was it day 4 or day 5?
Yes, it was. Yeah, day 5, yeah. Day 5 into day 6 was the real key period in the race. But it could also, you never 100% know for sure what factors cause it in a race, and could you have gone faster? The fact that I was so far out in the lead, it's got to have an effect on your mentality, because the number one goal once you're in the lead has got to be thinking about winning the race rather than breaking any kind of records, because you would have to take greater risks in order to have a chance of breaking records. And when you think about it, what is the point of taking those greater risks to try and break the record?
If it's going to be at the risk
if it was at the risk of maybe not finishing the race. So
Mm.
you're always trying to keep just under that level of comfort that you don't do anything too risky that might lead to greater illness or injury. So you're just trying to maintain that level just where you're in control of it. So the fact that I was constantly in the lead and could see that lead developing stopped me perhaps pushing harder for the greater pace. But I can't know for sure. Maybe if somebody had been there doing an hour faster than me every day, maybe I would have pushed faster. But at the time, you are convinced that you're going as hard as you can do.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, as if this isn't challenging enough, we watched this weather system develop, and Helen sent me a text, and she's like, "You're not going to believe this. This hurricane that, is off the coast of Mexico is going to blow in across during Dave's race." And I mean, it looked horrendous, the pictures we saw on TV. How was it to experience a sort of the heavy rain and the high winds and stuff when you're in the middle of a Deca Ironman?
Yeah, I would say we didn't feel the full force of a hurricane as such. I didn't see things being blown down as such, but we were kind of in its wake. So it was almost the contrast in weather that caused so many difficulties for people within our race. That on day 3, I think it was, we had temperatures of like 36 degrees. And I remember drinking from the bottle on my bike. I had a Gatorade, one of those green ones, and it was actually melting. So when I squeezed it to drink, my fingers just kind of pushed into the plastic. So then you think you're probably drinking some kind of semi-plastic.
Oh, that's not good, is it?
So it was the contrast from that. And then on the afternoon of day 5, which was when the hurricane was just starting to appear about 200 kilometers away, we had really, really heavy rain. And luckily for me, on day 5, I just got onto the run when it started. And some of the people behind me, especially I felt for Kathy Tibbetts, the American lady, that she suffers with Raynaud's like I do, but she had 3 hours on the bike in the driving rain, and then on the run, she just never managed to get warm, and it took her 18 or 19 hours, and that was enough to kind of just break her spirit. And I'm sure that if she could have just got through that day 5 and got going on day 6, she would have survived the whole race.
Yeah.
But I was kind of okay then because I was only running in the bad rain. But the knock-on
Just talk a little bit about Raynaud's, Dave, for someone who doesn't know what that is, will you?
It's kind of a illness where the blood just seems to disappear out of your hands and feet. They just go completely white and numb with the cold. So the people who I've most noticed it in, it seems very prevalent in endurance runners for some reason. Not 100% sure of what the reason for that is, but I know that now I do seriously have to select which races I can contemplate doing because of it. If it's going to be too cold, I know that it can actually be a danger for me on the bike. Earlier this year I did the Wasdale race, which was in really, really England's coldest, deepest lake.
Yeah.
And it involves cycling up Hard Knot Pass straight away. And coming down Hard Knot Pass, I just didn't have the feeling in my hands to be able to pull the brakes on my bike, and ended up crashing. So
crikey.
I just know now that is the effect that Raynaud's can have. And so I've really got to put it into my calculations now as to which races I can do and which I can't.
Yeah.
Because there's really no point going out and doing a race like that if I'm going to be a risk in the early stages of the bike.
Yeah, of course. So you're struggling with numb feet and numb hands on day 5 as it's absolutely freezing cold. I mean, the thing that I'm really interested in, Dave, with you and these other super ultra endurance athletes who do multi-day events, is I know for myself, I get a sense of, well, I've just had enough of this now. I'm not enjoying it anymore, and my toys go out of the pram. I'm not enjoying it, and I'm going home, and I'm never doing another one of these again. And for me, the big battle is to fight that voice in my head when it comes, and the times are difficult, and I'm hurting, and there's an hour and a half to go on the bike, and a marathon still to run. What must happen? Do you get a similar voice in your head arguing with you when you're doing these multi-day races, or is it
Yeah,
a constant process of sort of positive self-talk? How does it work for you?
yeah. It's not just multi-day races; it's any race. And I think it's quite reassuring the more people that you talk to realise that we all have these little voices going on. I would say I feel it in 5K races. I'll get maybe, because you're going at a greater intensity of effort then. So a 5K race takes me roughly 18 minutes. And I'll feel comfortable for about 6 or 7 minutes, and about 9 minutes, the pain and discomfort and the sick feelings start kicking in. And it can be from then till the end of the 5K race that I'm thinking, I don't enjoy this anymore. I don't like running this. And it's so the longer the race is, I just find it's the last third, no matter what the distance of race is, we all do some kind of subconscious calculation in our heads to get through whatever the distance of race it is.
Yeah.
It's like if you're doing a marathon, traditionally the hitting the wall thing takes place at about 20 to 21 miles, doesn't it? And then at 24 and a half, 25 miles, we all start feeling okay again. And it's just completely the psychology, because we're almost finishing it. Whereas if on that particular day, if you were doing a 35-mile race, you'd probably go sailing straight through 26.2, no problem at all. And it'd probably be about 28 miles that you'd start having those horrible feelings that you'd have to start doing battle with.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So do you have any tips and tricks that you use that you're conscious of when you're doing these really long events? What are some of the things that help you through?
I think it mostly comes from experience now. The fact that I've been in so many dark places during races, and I've got the experience that those dark places come to an end. And the more times you've experienced that, of really feeling so bad in a race, but then you've actually had a good finish to the event, so you felt fine at the end. So the more times that has happened to you, the more it helps you to believe that when that dark moment arrives, that you've got it within you, the moment will pass, and that you can still have a good race. And it's just, again, it's like a self-fulfilling thing. A few of us were discussing it on the day before the Deca, and you could almost tell from talking to people, the ones who were actually going to make it to the finish, almost about the way they were talking about about these low moments and getting through them. And it's just talking. Wayne Kurtz, for example, I was saying to people, if you wanted to put money on somebody who's going to finish this race, I'd say stake your mortgage on Wayne Kurtz. He will finish it. And he did. And it's very hard to put your finger on exactly what it is, the way he's talking and his demeanour, that makes you so convinced that he is going to finish. And it must just be something about how he talks about dealing with the issues that crop up, and his mental attitude that, nothing's going to faze him.
Yeah.
And similarly, you can just tell, there's just something about the way that some people talk that you can just tell, they're only going to do 2, 3 or 4 days. You just somehow, you just know it. And you're usually right. So answering your question, I would say it is a lot of it is down to just having experienced those feelings and come through them, and really, really believing that is one of the main things. And also on top of that, there must certainly be within me a certain amount of innate determination. I just don't know where that comes from, of a capacity to not want to give up on things.
Yeah, yeah. Now I remember we interviewed you about a year ago now, actually, when you did the previous Deca, and a lot of people won't have heard that interview. So let's talk a little bit about your past and your athletic history, because it's easy to hear your story about, you know, the running from Britain to Rome and the multiple Deca Ironman championships and things like this, and think that you're obviously a natural all-round sport Billy who's always been fantastic at sport all the way through his life and was probably captain of the football team. But that wasn't really your experience, was it?
No, absolutely not. The talks that I've done, it's almost the opposite of that. You know, certainly when I started at high school, aged 11, out of 24 boys in my class, when we did the 100 metres running race, I was actually the slowest runner in the class. 200 metres, I'd be the slowest. 400, the slowest. Even when we got up to the longer distances, I would still be in. I'd do slightly better, but I'd just be in the bottom third. And I can remember my parents coming and watching a cross-country race that I did when I was in the first year at grammar school, and you know, I was in like the last 3 or 4 finishers. So I would say I didn't start from a position of great athletic talent whatsoever, but sometimes that can, because I'm so convinced that so much of ultra distance racing lies between the ears. I think it's down to something like 80 or 90% is mental, of deciding how successful you're going to be in a Deca. That maybe that grounding of not having been successful at sport as a boy provides the impetus and the drive to work harder. That maybe if you find things too easy at that age, it doesn't develop that tenacity and determination and doggedness to keep going when the going gets tough.
And is that something you're very conscious of then, when you are in pain in the middle of a race, in the middle of a Deca? Is it something you can consciously bring to the surface, the ideas of sort of not having been very good at it when you were younger, and that kind of drives you on? Or is it something different that drives you these days?
It's very hard to say. I think I've gradually come round to the acceptance that I've got some kind of ability which is unusual, but I don't think it is per se an ability to run fast. I know some people will totally disagree, because they will say, well, you can run a mile in under 6 minutes, which for lots of people that is a massive dream, to be able to run that fast. But I didn't develop the ability to run a mile in under 6 minutes until I was well into my 30s. So and
that's amazing, isn't it? That it's relatively late on in life to begin to show signs of, you know, very decent running ability, but you're already into your mid-30s at that point.
Yeah, I think that is why in my role as a personal trainer, especially, that I serve as quite a motivational purpose for other people, you know, because we do. Our sporting lives are very much dominated in this country, especially by football, aren't they? Whereas where it's generally perceived that the day you hit your 30th birthday, you're on the downhill stretch then, as regards your career in that sport. Whereas I hadn't even reached the beginnings of the things that I was going to achieve until I was way past 30. So people having heard my story, I think it does inspire and motivate them when they were thinking that their best days were behind them, to see that maybe they're not. Well, almost certainly they're not for most people. In fact, sorry, Rob, the Greek chap who was at who did the Deca last year and he finished second. I think he said he was 39, and he said he'd come to the race last year, fully believing that was his swan song and it was his last big attempt at a big race before he would consider himself too old. And he said racing against me and realising that I was, 15 years older than him had completely changed his thoughts on it and made him realise that, all things are possible. Yeah.
Brilliant. I love that. And how old are you at this year, Dave? Tell everyone how old you are.
I was just trying to work it out before with my last client. I couldn't actually remember. I had to work
it's
it
as
out
old as that.
I had to work it out from my date of birth. Yeah, so I was born in 1959. So, I must be 56.
So it's worth pointing out as well, you've also had some really good success at the single Ironman distance, most notably by winning your age group at Ironman UK last year and then heading over to Kona and racing at Kona. Talk a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, about the contrast between what is perceived as, the biggest, Kona being the biggest endurance race, the pinnacle of Ironman racing, and the sort of the things that are good about that, but then the differences that you find in Deca and ultra racing, and the differences in the communities.
Yeah, so it's almost like two different sports, really. I mean, I don't want to go down the road of decrying Hawaii and Kona and
no, sure, because qualifying
for
Hawaii is a really big deal, and it's I remember we were talking and when we were working together, and you said I'd actually really like to go to Hawaii. That'd be brilliant. So it's not so much about sort of slagging that off as just a contrast of, the thing that's always struck me is when you've talked about the sense of community amongst the racers at ultra being even more so than that sense of community amongst the racers at a normal Ironman, which is already pretty phenomenal, isn't it, at most of the races you'll go and do?
Yes. Yeah, I would say things have gradually changed throughout my triathlon career. I've been doing them for 30 years and started off doing like what are now called sprints or Olympic distance kind of distance races. And they then got very, very competitive. There was a lot of intensity and aggression within the racing. And I gradually moved up the distance and went up to Ironman because there seemed to be a more generous spirit about Ironman races than the shorter distance. And then Ironman itself has become very competitive. So it's almost like the longer the distance of the race and the more arduous it is, the greater the bond between the competitors and the camaraderie that develops.
And one of the things that struck me was reading your Facebook updates was how in a sport that is sometimes dominated by self and by people sort of tweeting and Facebooking about their own achievements, your post quite often focused on the other people who were in the race, which I just found amazing at a time when you personally are going through such a big thing. You seemed almost entirely focused on the other people in the race and talking about what they were doing. It just sounded amazing, Dave.
Yeah, well, that's what it's all about. That's what really develops within those races. I think I was saying before about how that Kathy Tibbetts and how we had the heavy rain on the day 5. So when we got up on the morning of day 6, it was driving with rain then. And our race was, the base of the race is at 2,000 meters. So because of the heavy rain was coming down from the mountain. So it's probably coming up down from mountain streams that were like at 4,000 meters, say. So suddenly the water that we had been swimming in, it just felt like overnight that somebody had gone and filled it with ice. And it was really quite a shock. 6 days into the race, to suddenly be in water where the temperature of it had plummeted, coupled with the fact that after 5 days racing, we'd lost, a certain amount of body fat, and because of our fatigue, we were so much more sensitive to the cold in any case. So during that swim, another 3 people pulled out of the race because of the cold, and it was just such a shock to me it was 6 laps to swim, to realise that on laps 5 and 6 I was actually fighting to keep my concentration, when it's so cold that you're starting to get vaguely worried that you might pass out, and that you feel that you've got no strength in your arms, and you just can't focus or concentrate on the job in hand at all. And if you told me that day that I got to swim 7 laps, I think I would probably have got out myself. When I got out of the water there and was offered a cup of coffee, there was actually no way I could drink it, because even in 2 hands, my whole body was shaking too violently to hold a cup. And we had to get on the bike then, and the roads were completely and utterly flooded. It was like 6-7 inches deep in water that we were trekking through on the bike. And so we all had to, on day 6, the 6 of us that remained after that swim had to get through that complete and utter deluge. And then in the afternoon that day, with the back end of the hurricane, the winds were so strong that I was cycling at something like 11 miles an hour against the wind and like 30 miles an hour with it. And then suddenly, just as the bike finished and got out on the run, just a complete calm came over the whole place. It was a sunny, beautiful evening, and everything just seemed completely serene and calm. And the 6 of us that were left then, when we were passing each other on the run, this is where the real camaraderie came from, that we were just smiling and grinning at each other. It was like, this race has thrown absolutely everything at us that it possibly can do, and we've kind of come through this ordeal together, and that is what really developed the bond there. So in other races, you've not really got the chance to develop that kind of bond because you're not going to have come through something as arduous. The only place I've seen it was when I went and watched the Ironman at Tenby last year, when the swimming conditions were so bad. And I watched everybody, all 2,000 of them, coming out of the swim. And the looks on everybody's faces as they were going to their bikes were just like they'd been through a major ordeal. Like they looked like they were almost in shock. And so I think the competitors on that day will have really developed a kind of togetherness because they'd come through something really, really arduous.
That's an amazing story.
Yeah, so it was from then onwards, from that day 6, you could just tell then that, we were saying to each other, a couple of us who were running, you can almost guarantee now that those 6 who've managed to survive today, even though we've got 4 more days of doing an Ironman each day, we were like 99% certain that those 6 were going to make it to the finish. And of course we all did.
Yeah.
So that's why it's such a big, why I was writing in my daily reports and things about the other people as well, because it is such a shared experience that you're coming through together. And those 6 people who did finish it, it's developed a bond with us, which will probably remain with us for the rest of our lives. It's
that's
big.
Amazing. Yeah, you really got a sense of that reading your daily updates. Listen, Dave, I need to let you go. You're a busy man, and despite having just got back with your World Championships, you've got to get stuck straight back into personal training, people. So I do hope that whoever your client is late this afternoon takes it easy on your little legs for a little while.
All right, thanks very much, listen. Rob. Thanks for calling.
Oh no, man, thank you for taking the time to come on and talk to us. It's really great to hear from you, and And it's great to hear you know you had the tenacity to go back for another year and to win the Deca Ironman, which I just think is an amazing achievement, and even more so given the fact that you've just remembered you're 56 years old, Dave. You're an inspiration to all of us.
Yeah.
All right, man. You
All
take
right.
care of yourself, and we'll speak to you soon. Thanks a lot.
Thanks very much, Rob. Cheers, then. Bye-bye.
So there we go. Right, so we'll leave the show here, Hells. We'll wrap it up.
Fantastic.
It's been great talking to you, my friend.
Thank you very much. Likewise.
And you've been listening to the Cup of Triathlon podcast. We've been brought to you by oxygenaddict.com, fueledbycake.com, and raceforce.co.uk. I think there's still time to get yourself in for a trip out to Sardinia, isn't there, for Challenge Sardinia?
No, that one's been and gone.
Oh, it's finished for the year, is it?
The challenge.
So whatever you do, don't try and sign up for Challenge
Don't do
Sardinia.
challenge.
Race
That was
Force.
the one that Susie Cheetham won.
It was last week, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
that was last week's.
That's because you weren't here last week, Hells, and I didn't get to chat to you about it.
Oh no, that was it, wasn't it? So
We just had an interview last week, didn't we, with Emma?
Emma.
Because you weren't here, and so we couldn't do the thing. And so we missed that. We missed talking about Caroline Livesey at Turkey getting third.
Yeah, that's
Oh, all messed up.
Oh dear. So no Sardinia with Raceforce, but I did see they are 70.3 Barcelona. They're taking bookings, and Austria. I'm in Austria as well, taking bookings for the bike on that. So check out raceforce.co.uk.
If you're looking for bike transport or race hotel hosting and the whole deal over there next year for someone to look after you, Kate and her gang will do the job for you. So get over there and check it out. Right, Hells, let's wrap it up. Take care, and until next week, we shall see you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.